Welcome to the NativeScript show, where we cut right to the content without delay, just like the framework cuts to the platform. Okay, let's start right up at the top. Nathaniel Anderson, hello from Mexico. What you got to share?
I have something about how to optimize your font so that you're not using a lot of disk space on your application.
That's super cool. Jamie, up in the top right, what you got, sir?
Hey, I'm thinking of showing some NativeScript at runtime. That's it.
Cool. Brad, down low, what you got, sir?
I am going to demonstrate how to open the Android project in Android Studio and start the profiler.
Man, is that useful. Sweet. Tiago from Portugal, what you got, sir?
Hi. I am going to show how to invert the list view, so make it work upside down.
God, I've needed to do that so many times. Awesome. Shiva, down right, what you got, man?
Hey, today I'm going to show Gotcha, which is about event attachment onto text views and observables. It's all about core NativeScript.
Slick. And are you talking from New Zealand today?
Yep, right from my office. Yeah.
Very cool. I have something to share as well. I'm going to be touching on a really useful delegate override for the text field that is really neat and solves a very practical use case that's been a problem for many development circles. So starting actually top right, we're going to start with Jamie Birch. Feel free to expand.
Okay, so I was hoping that this demo would be sort of an interactive one. I'm going to show you a tool that I made about a year ago, and I have a few little snippets of code I want to run through it. But really, I just want to see what you guys might be interested in having a peek at. So what this is it's a REPL for NativeScript. It allows you to evaluate NativeScript code while the app is running. So I'll share my screen and we'll just give it a go. What I've done is it's a text view. And as you type into it, you'll see it tells you everything that's available in the global context. And you can run NativeScript commands at runtime. I see Tiago's mouth opening there. So this is a self-made REPL. It's got all sorts of imperfections because all it does is it takes your text literally, copy pastes it, runs whatever the JavaScript term was. It's like eval, can't remember what the method was, and it collects whatever result was. Anything that you do, like here, like x equals 5. Of course, it's not strict mode. Make a constant called x. Run it. It's 5. If we clear all of that and run it again, it's lost it. Doesn't hold on to what's the word? State. This would be possible if we had like NativeScript embedded into a Node.js runtime, because Node.js exposes a nice little REPL module. But this is all I could do with what I could figure out how to do. So
that's funny you mentioned that. Yeah, Nathaniel Anderson and I have been talking about some things similar that could be useful in that context. So the area above, as you type and you run it, it's basically evaluating that JavaScript context and printing the result below.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Has there been anything inside here as far as executing that is not able to execute in this way?
So there's a few subtleties, such as, headline. No, pretty much everything works. There's a few but not everything, because NativeScript has got this kind of lazy, the metadata lazily loads in. So there's a few methods that you'll see in the TypeScript typings, the TNS platform declarations, that if you try typing in, you'll find aren't actually found until you run the command. And we'll struggle to think of an example of this.
I'm kind of curious can you instantiate views and open them from here? Like if you actually got a reference to the root view controller, could you actually open a UI view from the modal presenter from there?
Absolutely. It's all fun.
That's pretty wild.
So I've actually got a code snippet that does this. So rather than me like sweating trying to figure out how to write a modal presentation first try, I'm just going to grab something from GitHub, which does all of this. So if you'll bear with me, I have just a little code snippet. It's actually enormous. 1 moment. So hopefully,
Wow.
that's the thing. Now, for people who aren't familiar with NativeScript, I should probably preface, this is JavaScript and it's calling into the Objective-C runtime. You see things like SK scene, that is calling into the SpriteKit SDK. And all the way down here, there will be a UI view controller present. So that's the main thing that we were discussing a second ago. Can we present a UI view controller? And yes, I've got quite an interesting one to present. Hopefully I don't need to change any of this code to get it running. Well, hey, there we go.
Wow, that is incredible. Now
So
the scene that you're playing with there, now is that an example from like a demo that you had pulled, and it's just basically opening that scene in there, right?
This is a whole SpriteKit game written using NativeScript, and I thought it was the coolest thing that you could put into a UI view controller.
Incredible.
And so just presenting that.
That is super cool. And so you can still swipe down with the gesture, like that's just the native modal presentation, right?
Maybe. So since this changed to iOS 13, modals, presented view controllers now have got this gap at the top. I don't know if gestures are on by default. That might be something I need to. Oh, yeah, there we go.
Yeah. No, the iOS 13 modal gesture is kind of it's nice. It's kind of a nice touch.
We might have a memory leak now because I haven't handled that yet.
Yeah. Clearing it when it closes.
So there's all sorts of things we can have a look at. So I dived into my most advanced example rather than going into the basics. But things like we're holding onto UI view there. We can have a look at its frame. It's exactly as you'd expect. You can then go deeper into, it's got origin. I'm going to press tab there, and it identifies that X and Y are available. And you can have a look at each of those as I come along.
This is really just amazing work, Jamie. When did you start working on this?
This is my second NativeScript app. The first one was a sort of OCR app, and I just kind of got enchanted by just how much NativeScript was capable of doing. I thought, I really don't know some of the methods. Like, let's give an example from NSArray. I'm from a Swift background, and there's all sorts of things where NSArray differs. For example, if you want to like do a for each loop on it, you need to get you don't write it the same way in Swift as Objective-C. So I was always trying to figure out, well, what on earth do I have to write? Whereas, if you've got a REPL, you can just go character by character and see which things are available. And so it was a tool for me to learn NativeScript, which was why it made sense as an initial app.
Yeah, it's really, really quite amazing. That's the text view area, right? That you're having an issue with getting the height right in the center there. Yeah. Now I'm going to get back with you on that for sure, and I've got the project loaded. But yeah, that's really, really neat.
Thank you.
Let's see. Anyone else want to comment on what Jamie's got there?
That is really awesome. I have a debugger similar to that where you can actually hold the stuff, but mine never was this advanced. That's pretty cool what you got there, where it actually pulls in the keys and properties that are available for that. That's pretty sweet.
Thank you.
A small UX tip, maybe some padding around that top input area so I don't feel like I'm typing on the time label there.
Oh, absolutely. Like UX was utterly the lowest of my pile of things. It's to be honest, I was having a lot of problems figuring out how Flexbox works in NativeScript Core, because like percentage percentage heights and widths, they do not seem to act the same as they do on web. So it's a miracle that I really got anything on screen. But now that I've moved this all to React NativeScript, I can think a bit more freely and iterate a bit faster. And I'm hoping to make the design like not dreadful.
For sure. Well, it's super cool. Thanks for sharing that, Jamie. Let's go to the top there, Nathaniel Anderson. What you got, my man?
Okay, I am going to start sharing my screen too. If I figure out where it's at. Share, that's what I want.
And hey, Martin, thanks for joining us.
We need Jamie to stop sharing. I can't share until he's done sharing.
On the case of trying to find where the stop sharing button is, it's quite a labyrinth.
Nathaniel, go ahead.
So if all of you guys are aware that like I have fonts take up a lot of space. Like I just was playing with the duotone font awesome fonts the other day, and as you can see, it's 0.5 MB in size. Font awesome by default is 138K. And if you use enough of these fonts inside an application, you can actually start using a good chunk of disk space for an application. There is a website, there's a couple of them actually, but one of them I use is called Fontello. And what it allows you to do is actually pick fonts, characters that you want to use in a custom font. You can see here where I've got this one selected, these ones all selected. And then you can actually customize what the codes are, so that way you can just put them all in order so it's easy to access in your application. It'll generate the CSS, and it can also generate like the character names if you want. And then you can download that font, and if you look in this folder, I've already downloaded it, it's only 11K. So rather than using 500K worth of fonts, I'm using 11K worth of disk space for all these custom fonts that I'm using. The really nice thing in addition about Fontello is you can actually import additional SVG images. So if there's something that's not in one of the default fonts that are already there, you can easily just upload a new character right into it and just assign it a new code that it's in, and you'll have it there. So it's very good for creating custom fonts of like different characters, not normally for your normal fonts, but for icon type fonts. And but you could use it through A through Z if you really wanted to. I've never bothered with that side of it, but I normally do it for all my custom fonts and combine all the different fonts that into one little font set. And then it also creates this neat little file called config.json, which you can upload at a later point. So if you realize, oh crap, I forgot this character, you can just upload this right to the site. It'll reselect all the fonts, re-import any SVGs you had because it gets imported into this file. Then you go add a new SVG or add a new font, and then re-download it, and you're done. So that's basically what I wanted to share in a nutshell.
You know, I prefer font icons over images any day.
Oh, yeah.
And even SVGs in a lot of ways. But yeah, font icons are just really nice to work with.
Well, the interesting thing is those SVGs will come in as a font icon, and they'll have the same attributes as a font icon where you can scale them to any size you need. And so your app can look really sharp with these huge SVG images or huge font icons because you can scale them to any size. And so, yeah, I do too. I way prefer this over any images. If I can put it into a font, I'm very happy for as many images as possible. I don't know how much time I have. This part you can clip. But we could also talk about the duotone fonts.
Yeah, why don't you touch on it? Because I think that's an interesting thing that came up recently, and I know a lot of people, even myself, want to know exactly how you do that.
Okay, so let me start Storm real quick. Let's run. Font Awesome actually has what are called duotone fonts. And actually, I can probably navigate to the website real quick. Font Awesome. And what these duotone fonts are is, so let's let this part. Takes for load. What the duotone fonts are is there are two different fonts that are separated. Bird search, for another bird's a duotone. I even have a little link on the side if you just want to look at their duotone font. So let's assume this one's a duotone. And you'll see on here that there's two shadings. There's a blue dark and then there's a blue light. What that allows you to do is each one of these two pieces of font can be colored any way you want. And if you see on my emulator over here, that's finally started up, you'll see that I have this acorn that I made the inside part of the shell green and the outside gray. And then the bird, a different font bird, I made the outside body blue and the inside legs orange. And this technique is actually really simple to do. Oh, sorry, I need to switch projects. Okay, I don't see it in there. Open way too many projects today. I'll just go into the actual code here. And this technique to do this is actually really simple. Basically, what you're doing is you are dropping a grid layout, and then you're dropping both fonts into the same column and row. So this first font, you'll see I put in column 1, and I gave it its code here, and I gave it the second code. And if you go to the Font Awesome site, you'll see right up here at the top, it gives you both codes that you need that I just selected there. So you just copy the code, and you just paste it right in there, and then you go to the next one, and you copy that code out, and you paste it in there. And just for as an aside, all you have to do is actually take the first code and add 10 to it. You might notice that here. The code difference is they put it into a different region of the Unicode thing. So all you have to do is, you have the first number F6AE, then you can do 100F6AE. And the same thing with the bird. I just dropped in the code for it. And then you can style whatever classes you want. And so in my case, I had larger, which makes the font a little bit bigger. And then I had, I wanted it blue, and then I wanted the opacity set to the legs to be a bit more opaque, and I set it to red. So you can style it like any other fonts, and that's basically it in a nutshell. There is a small difference for Angular. You have to run a little directive that helps it because Angular's parsing screws up with the upper Unicode variables, but it's pretty simple to do, and we can cover that if you want.
That is super cool. Now, I assume you could not use label formatting string because the formatting string would always be aligned out horizontally. And in this case, you want the Unicode stacked on top, which is why you've got them in a grid in the same column position.
Correct.
Yeah.
You need it in the same grid, otherwise you have to stack them on top of it. By default, the CSS that Font Awesome provides for web browser automatically does that. So when you just say I want to use this fad, that's what they prefix their code with. So I use the same letter or class. All it does is it says, oh, we're going to put this character here, and then we're going to put this character on top of it. So it's all hidden behind the scenes in the CSS. But they're doing the exact same thing that we have to just do manually in NativeScript.
This is a perfect opportunity where you actually could extend the label class to support a custom component that would do this for you automatically with one single view component, where you could pass it a binding of 2 Unicodes, and it would actually do this. It's also an opportunity where you could do components or a directive with Angular or Vue. You could wrap in a custom component, and same with React. That could probably extrapolate that. Yeah, it's nice to see the nuts and bolts of how that actually works, and then you can come up with many creative ways to probably extrapolate that.
Oh yeah. When I was building this, I'm like, oh yeah, it could be simplified very, very much, because you could create your own custom label with, you put in the one Unicode, it'll automatically know what the other Unicode is, because by default it's always the additional 10 prefix, and then you just have to set what the classes are on the 2 of them separately, because you want the one to be one color, and you might want the other one to have opacity, you might want the other one to be solid.
So the secondary duotone is always prefixed with 10, always?
Yes. It's always the same number and then prefixed with 10. So it just puts it into a different spot in the Unicode table. So it makes it really easy to use. So once you know the first code, you can set the second code.
All right, we're looking at you, community, to come up with a slick custom component to do that in one go. That's really cool. Thanks, Nathaniel.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to share something really, really cool that, it's actually pretty wild how complex and how troubling this situation is. But it was reported on the Expo repo for React Native here, which is actually still open. It was reported separately as a different issue with a different solution, also on the React Native repo that was closed. However, people still experience the same issue on iOS 13 as of January 14th. And then there's a third issue that's actually open on React Native, which is the exact same issue, where just 14 days ago, it's still being complained that the issue still exists. Now, the reason this is such a problem, if you look at the first comment, what I'm actually talking about is this thing on iOS 12 and above. They introduced this where it's an auto-strong password. Now, you would think there would be a direct solution to disable this on UI that you don't want this, and the answer is no, there is not. There is actually not an automatic way to turn this off. And it's very troubling and very undesired in a lot of situations. For instance, username and login, password. In those cases, you're not registering user, you're just logging in. So why would they want to use a strong password when they're just logging in? There's many cases where this becomes a problem. It turns out iOS 12 picks up the text field secure property, and if that is set, it will actually auto-engage this. And it can be somewhat unknown exactly when this will show. There's times it will show unexpectedly, other times it might not show. Sometimes it's dependent upon how quick you tap the keyboard when you tap into a secure field. So it's very annoying. So you can see here that when this issue first came up back in November 2018, it was mentioned here, this requires changes to the text input component that we currently get from React Native upstream, so it'll be a while before we get around to being able to write our own, right? So this is exactly the reason why NativeScript is pretty nice in this sense, because all it took was a suggestion actually on this Expo repo here. This contributor here, and actually I'll state his name, Ashish Verma, really thank you for this solution, by the way. This is a wonderful way to deal with this. And I've tried all the solutions that are suggested across Stack Overflow, all of the solutions and suggestions that were posted throughout this very lengthy discussion on React Native repos across 3 different separate issues. And none of them worked as reliably and bulletproof as the suggestion by Ashish. And what I was able to do is just override the delegate in the text field and just have it automatically handle this situation. And so to make it extra nice, I actually introduced a PR to NativeScript core that provides the secure without autofill. And it automatically engages the delegate in the right way to do this. Now, you actually don't even have to modify NativeScript core to do this. You can grab the delegate reference from the text field's iOS property and call super on its delegate method, and then also implement the exact same code yourself in your project today. So this is actually really easy to override yourself in your project today, but this PR is just a simple property that makes it that much nicer, because all you have to do when you don't want that is call secure with autofill true. It'll still be a secure text field, but it will avoid the autofill in all situations, no matter what.
I'd like to ask about that. So
sure.
I was actually using the same delegate method to achieve something unrelated, and I couldn't figure out how, supposing you're using the NativeScript core's text, let's say text view this time rather than text field, if it's already got a perfectly good delegate and you just want to override one bit of functionality for it for your particular use case, I wasn't really sure how to do that apart from copying everything in the NativeScript core UI text view folder and rolling my own text view from the beginning. I'm sure you may have some advice there.
Yeah, for sure. Let me show you something.
I also had to implement a text field delegate recently to avoid the keyboard from closing. So yeah, it takes a bit of work, but it's better than creating a new text field from scratch.
So here's what you can do. You can actually take the existing delegate that's off of any property. Okay, so in this case, this is actually taking an existing delegate off the UI application. It's using its prototype to override that existing method. And then inside here, you can actually call super of this prototype to actually call any existing behavior upstream. But this allows you to take an existing delegate that's already there and override the prototype method to call any custom logic that you want.
That presumably is going to affect every instance of, so if we were overriding application there, actually application's a bad example because it's a singleton, but if we were overriding text views delegate in that fashion, it would affect every single text view in our app rather than just a specific one, right?
Right, exactly. And definitely in the cases where you want basically the behavior across the app, it's nice to override, and do it in this way. So it depends if you're wanting it on one case alone or all of them. But that's why I wanted to do a separate property here, because in some cases you may want it, but in this case it can basically set it up on a one-to-one. But yeah, you can give that a shot on the prototype chain to just override any existing delegate behavior.
I think it makes sense for my app, certainly.
But that's all I had to share there. It's definitely an interesting and very surprising, troubling issue to deal with. Let's go back to the bottom here. Tiago, what you got, buddy?
Oh, I've got to head off, by the way, I think.
Oh, yeah. Jamie, it's good to see you.
See you next time, guys.
Yep.
Okay, so I am working on this chat app for quite some time now. And one of the main components of the app is, of course, the message list, the screen where the messages appear. And I was spending lots of time optimizing this component, and it was not always quite okay. So at one point, I found this article. I will share my screen. So I found this article about how Discord achieves native iOS performance with React Native. And of course, I was very interested in how they did it and the problems that they had and how they solved it. So I was looking through this article, and I found this component that they were trying, this React Native large list. And I was looking through this component, and I found at some point this very interesting feature, support inverted. So what this does is it inverts the list view, because when you are in a chat app, you actually want the list to render in the opposite direction. So you want the message list to grow up and not down. And I was having lots of problems because I had to put the elements in the list view, then somehow wait for them to render, and then force the scroll to come all the way down. It was kind of messy. The screen was jumping all over the place. So I was looking into this component and how they implemented the inverted feature. And so at some point I found the solution. Scale Y inverted. If the list view is inverted, then it's set to -1. So scale Y -1. What this does is, kind of intuitive. It flips the component vertically. Can you see? Okay, this is a small application that I made. It's actually just two list views, one next to the other, so that I can show this technique in action. So the first thing that I have to do is to set scale Y -1 to the list view. And when it updates. Okay, so here it is. It's a bit weird because the list on the left is now upside down. Okay, but you can actually interact with it. It's weird, but it works. And also, you can see that the clicks are working, the events are working. So all I have to do is also to invert each element of the list view. In this case, I have two elements, two templates. So, and this is it. So I inverted the whole list view, and then I inverted, no, I flipped vertically each element, and now I have a perfectly functional list view that works upside down. And as you can see, the performance is great. I mean, you cannot tell the difference between one or the other, and everything works. Events work just fine, and everything works. No, when a new message appears, it's added where I want it, and I don't have to make these weird things that I had to do before, moving the scroll upside down.
Tiago, this is brilliant. This is brilliant. We actually need something like this in an app we're building right now. So the key is you have to invert the list view itself, turns it upside down, and then you invert the elements inside. Now, you're just inverting just the root node of the template row, right? So all it takes is scale y minus one on the container that basically contains the row, and that's it, right?
That's
fantastic.
It was a very weird solution that I could not believe it works, but it works fine. There is one minor caveat. Because I was very happy with this solution, I deployed it to our the beta testers, and this one guy with an Android version was reporting that the momentum was working upside down. So when he did this, when he stopped touching the screen, the scroll would invert very fast and start rolling on the opposite direction. This I found out that was a bug on Android API 28. That meanwhile it was fixed because more people were doing this invert the scale y minus one trick. So they actually fixed this bug now, but some versions of Android, some distributions did not have this fix. So so in my project, I ended up implementing my own momentum. So I am kind of tracking the last touch events from the user, and when the user stops touching the screen on the touch up event, I am doing the slingshot movement which on Android is not that hard. It's just one little function, and I am using that code only for Android API 28.
That's really brilliant, Tiago. I'm curious, when you add an item to the list view and it appends it to the bottom of the list view, I assume that when it's inverted, think of a chat interface, right? And you're chatting, and basically that's an inverted list view where the new items are always appearing on the bottom. As you append items to that list view, do you need to unshift them in at the top for them to show up, or do you just append them as normal and they show up at the bottom, and it would feed naturally inverse?
No. I will have to put the new messages on top of on index 0.
Yeah, so you unshift them. Yeah, and
Messages.
they're added to
Yeah,
the
I understand.
exactly.
Yeah.
Nice. And if you were to call scroll to index 0, I assume that would scroll to the bottom, or would it scroll up to the top?
To the bottom.
To the bottom, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I am absolutely going to try that trick. Thank you for that, Tiago. It's
Okay.
super
And
useful.
yeah, and it's one another example of how we as NativeScript developers can always resort to other frameworks or even to the native platforms to find out how to do stuff. And yeah, it was great.
Yeah, super useful. Thank you so much. Let's see, Brad Martin, sir, what you got there?
All right, let me share my screen. Perfect. So I'm going to basically show how to open the Android app in Android Studio for NativeScript. So it's really simple. A lot of people don't know how to do it, but it's useful for profiling or modifying native files such as the manifest or any Gradle files that you have, and leveraging Android Studio to, IntelliSense and warnings and errors and version checking in your Gradle files also is very nice. So here in VS Code, we've got the platforms folder and then Android, and that is actually a native Android project. I've gone ahead and already built it, so we'll open up Android Studio, and you just select an existing Android Studio project. And I've already navigated to it, but here it is, desktop, demo app, platforms, Android. So I'm just going to select that, click open. It's already gone and synced and ran a build, so everything is working fine. If you go ahead and look here in the app, assets, app, you'll actually see the bundle, from Webpack when the application was built. And you can look at that if you want to, but that's not really useful in this specific case. But go ahead, and starting the profiler is really simple. Usually in the toolbar, depending on your configuration of Android Studio, there's just a profile button, which you can go ahead and click. It's going to launch, it's going to build and basically install the app on a running device that you have selected, or emulator here in this drop down here. And I've got this Pixel kicked off, installed successfully, and it's just starting up. So, and it takes a second here because the profiler's starting also. But there it is. It should actually kick off in just a second. But again, with the profiler running, it takes a little bit longer, and my computer's a little bit slow lately. So, but you can analyze CPU, memory, and everything. You can see the threads here, of course, in the CPU. Go back out to memory, inspect everything if you want to. Same thing with energy. You can actually check the battery usage as it's playing here. Another useful thing is tap events are recorded in Android Studio. You see these little purple dots here on the timeline. Those are touch events. So every tap here I'm doing, and you can hold, and that also registers. So that is it.
Wow.
Pretty
Now,
neat.
that is really
It's
useful.
It's very useful.
I've wanted to know how to do that for quite some time now. So when you're tapping, it's registering some of those peaks. That's probably the CPU kick up on the styler to get the active state, probably.
I've not looked into that, so I'm not going to actually make a claim. But yeah, just registering the touch events here, you do see a little spike every now and then. But I've never really looked into that, so I'm not certain. The network, I don't have anything here wired up, but you can actually, when you do an HTTP request, you'll see the network spike, and it tells you how much data, was upstream, downstream, and everything. So it's really useful also to check your network calls.
Very cool.
That's
That is very cool. On the threading, when you look at the thread output outline there, does that sometimes actually refer back, or have you seen it refer back to the recycler view sometimes in list views and anything like that?
I don't recall. I'm sure it does. I don't recall. But it will list out any thread that is actively running. I've written a native Android library for sensors for like accelerometer, and I had to create a background thread in there, and it actually ends up showing the thread background, everything. So it's pretty neat.
Yeah, that's very, very useful. Thanks for that, Brad. Very cool. Shiva, going to you, sir. What you got from New Zealand?
Yeah, so let me just share the screen here. Okay, so I've created a simple playground app to demonstrate the gotcha that I have to share today. It's something about property change event. So if you look at the docs, it says you can attach a property change event on any observable object, and then you can see which property changed and what was the value. You get other handy properties like what object changed, what was the old value, what's the new value, and stuff like this. I see that this could be useful in, let's say, generating a particular, a hash for an object every time some property changes in an object or something like that. So developers might be using this in all sorts of situations. So
let me mention for those
Yeah.
that may be new to NativeScript, if the observable object confuses you with RxJS, if you're coming from Angular or even in React and have used RxJS before, NativeScript has an observable object because it was developed and created. It was an early project in TypeScript, and it was before really RxJS became fairly mainstream. And so not to be confused with RxJS observable, but this is a base class for most of everything in NativeScript and helps emit events from various objects. But go ahead, Shiva.
Yeah, in this case, I have a simple set of buttons here. One to modify the observable property, one to attach a text change handler to this text field that you're seeing, one to detach the text change handler, and one to create an output. I just have a label here where I'm going to console log everything so you can see it clearly. And nothing much going on in the code behind file, just attaching the view model here. And I have these two properties where this user text is bound to this text field. And as you can see, if I try to make some change, the property change event of the observable module is firing, and you can see that some changes occurred. Also, if I modify the observable property, you see that every time I make some change, you see this text field is also changing, and I'm also getting the firing of the property change event. So let me clear the output there. Now I'm going to do attach text change handler. This is because I just want to, let's say, when the user types something, I want to format it in a specific way, or all sorts of cases. You could have attached a text change handler for different reasons. So what I'm doing here is getting the text field and attaching the text change event and doing something there. So let's say user modifies this text field, and you can see some text change occurred. So that means our text change handler is firing. So somewhere down the line, let's say something on the unloaded event, you detach the text change handler by doing this text field of text change. What you expect to happen is you attach this text field handler, you expect just the text change event to detach. You don't want any other side effects. Okay, let's click on this. So we detach the text change handler. Now the text change handler is gone. I expect this observable property change event to still fire, but let's see what happens. I make some changes, but you see there is no text change, the property change firing. But if I modify the property, you can see that the property change handler is still attached, but not on this text field. The binding is also still working. As you can see, like if I press this, every time I make some change to the property, you can see that the text field is changing, and also the property change is firing. But the only thing that happened is the backwards binding. So when something changes in the text, it does not trigger the property change event. So that's a side effect when simply removing the text change event without knowing that there is a property change event attached to the whole observable. So this is a gotcha that can bite you really hard if
Now,
you don't know what.
I'll say what I often do on event bindings is I'll bind the function handler to a local function. And when I use off, I'll always pass in that method reference to off. And so I'd be curious, I'm pretty sure it would avoid the situation, but I'm not certain. This actually could be something Martin could speak on, but that text change on, that handler right there that's setting the output text to some text change here, if that was actually bound to a method that was part of the view model, and then you use that same bound method as the second argument to off, I assume it should actually be more localized to just remove the text change event from that bound function and maybe not have side effects. But Martin, if you're there, I don't know if that's something I get to speak on. Does that sound correct?
I was going to arrive at the solution because the solution I was proposing is to never do that practice and instead have your text change handler defined somewhere else.
Nice.
And just pass it as the second argument.
Oh shoot! Well, I was speaking ahead of you, Shiva. You should have stopped me and told me to shut up.
I was gonna share the solution and the correct way to implement it. So now, what happens is if you pass the function as the second argument to the off event, then you're preventing this kind of side effect from occurring. And now, if I attach the text change handler, remove the text change handler, and if I make some change, you see that the property change event and the two-way binding on the text field is still intact, and we only removed the text change handler. You see the text change handler is no longer firing, and you can again attach it. And I don't know what happened there. Output is not defined. Okay. So now if I attach the text change handler, it should work fine.
It's probably a local scope with that output. Yeah.
So it should be fine.
This is a really, really good best practice tip, and I've seen this so many times before when you're dealing with bindings, because there's times when you're binding it on the component, and it's just for the life cycle of the component, and then it's destroyed and cleaned up by itself. But there's so many times that you have to do UX behaviors inside of components that are part of the page, and it's really a good practice to always keep the function handlers bound to the scope that you're dealing with them, so you can attach and detach the right ones without side effects. This is a really good tip.
Yeah, so now I detached the text change handler, attached it again, make some change, and you see some text change occurred. It works the way we expect it to work now because we are properly detaching and attaching the event handler. So that's what I wanted to share.
Excellent, Shiva. That is really, really good stuff. Thanks for everyone hopping on. Some really, really juicy stuff there. Really appreciate sharing from everyone. Awesome stuff. So with that, we are out.